This week we resume our journey through the suttas, and specifically with the giant among giants, the Mūlapariyāya Sutta, the first of the discourses of the middle-length discourses, the Majjhima Nikāya. And before you sat to meditate today, I was mentioning how it's quite a refreshing sight when I see all of you back, especially for the second week of this sutta, because many countless people, countless bhikkhus, monastics, have avoided even approaching this sutta because it was misunderstood, it was misrepresented, and oftentimes literally and intentionally avoided because of the incomprehensible ways that people thought it was speaking, referring, addressing this phenomenon called life. And how, meanwhile, we see in it, in fact, the Buddha simply giving us the tools, the code, the password, the operating system of how to really look at 151 other discourses that are to follow in the Majjhima Nikāya. So it is the dictionary, it is the alphabet with which we can understand, not necessarily decipher. The suttas are not puzzles for us to decipher or solve. They're not mathematical problems, equations that we have to solve. Understanding is required, and that is what the Mūlapariyāya, this sutta, is showing us. In other words, the Buddha is giving us the root pattern of behavior of all mind objects, not just the root of all things as we normally would have translated this sutta, and is translated often by many English scholars or translators, but we're trying to understand the different ways that the Buddha is addressing basically the same pattern, but to different and diverse concepts that we hold valuable. Now, specifically, he's pointing out the 24 structures or concepts that a person in those days, contemporaries of his, and specifically meditators and thinkers, were delving in and trying to understand life. So the role of this Mahatman, or great spirit, or great Brahma, or Pajapati, as we saw last time, the role that these things have in giving meaning to one's life, where you see it in connection to, well, your life is all about that. That's the ultimate destination for many people. Just like today, when you ask them, some people say, I want to be going to where the Buddhas live. That misconception, the wrong view. Just like in other religions, people say, I want to join with God, or this God-like figure after death or while alive, or dissolving into this, dissolving in this heavenly realm, or even in the case of an atheist, into nothingness. Even that is a concept that people are attached to. We take it as something solid. But the Buddha starts with the four great elements, or four constituent parts: earth, water, fire, and air. which for someone who's very much of a materialist looking at life, they want to see and feel things empirically with the senses. For them, they have to see it to believe it type of, that's the attitude they operate with. Even that requires an identification. So the Buddha in this teaching is pulling the rug from everything, every concept. So you might notice that some of the ideals that you might profess, you might have in your life, a concept that to you, without that, life means nothing. I mean, that's how much of a paramount role it plays for you, a concept or an approach you might have that you might not see in these 24. Don't worry, you can add it in there because it will match it. If there is a sense of identification, the Buddha has addressed that as well. So don't necessarily look for, oh, that principle is not there, the one that I really hold dear to my heart. You could be talking about love, saying that's everything for me. Well, you will find it there too. Because guess what? Even Nibbāna is placed in these 24 as the final, because the Buddha knew that even something as supramundane as the attainment of freedom, people in our ignorance, we will take that as a place to go to, as a state to grab onto, to reach, to enter into. Nivesaya. To enter into, to make our home, to make our domicile, to make our residence. The Buddha is saying there is nothing like that because it requires an identification, and we'll see how even Nibbāna itself doesn't escape the Buddha's scrutiny. Not Nibbāna as such, but our approach to Nibbāna, our understanding of Nibbāna. Because when we have flawed or rather dirty hands, really muddy, soiled, dirty hands, and you approach a freshly painted, fresh coat of paint that's on a wall, a beautifully white, clean piece of cloth, and you touch it, you're going to smudge it, aren't you? That image that I'm using is a metaphor for our ignorance. So even Nibbāna will be sullied. The image of Nibbāna, what it truly is, will not be experienced so long as we have these concepts, which again, the Buddha is coming one after the other to pull the rug from under. So if you're joining us with this second week of the Mūlapariyāya Sutta, highly recommend it for you to do the first week's, which is last week's, where I covered the first of the 4 types of individuals that this sutta is referring to, meaning the 4 types of individuals and how those 4, and we are in those 4, by the way, types of individuals who behave in a different way. We have set of rules or set of approaches or perspectives with which we approach these 24 concepts, these realities, if you will, these different states of identifications that we have in life. This is not about someone else. Remember, this is not about scholars like most of the idiotic interpretations of the sutta have been, unfortunately. So it has been an unfair treatment that this particular precious sutta has been exposed to over the centuries, simply because people did not try to understand that this was not about scholars. This was not something, a sutta, that the discourse that is only reserved for certain types of people. No, it's for everyone, in fact. In fact, it's a must. If you like any of the other suttas to follow, you have to understand this. So what are these four types of people? Last week we talked about the puthujjana. Puthujjana is the regular, ordinary person who is not delved into the Dhamma proper. Again, it might be somebody who's a scholar even of Buddhism. He has PhDs in Buddhism, has been a practitioner of Buddhism, but nevertheless, they are still puthujjanas because they're blockheads. They're dense. They do not allow flexibility in their understanding to give up their opinions and views, wrong views. A puthujjana does not, is staunchly attached to their views. They will not let go. If you teach them metta, they will hold on to it because it resonates with them, but they will not let it go. They will give up the Dhamma. They will give up Nibbāna because of how it makes them feel. Another person might be in love with the jhānas, with concentration, with some type of a jhana, with some level of jhana, and never want to leave. Another person might become infatuated with just maintaining sila or precepts and consider that to be the ultimate way of living a Dhammic life. And they're stuck there. They've identified. And you have many of such people. You have individuals who think about only doing good deeds and that's it. To them, that is the embodiment of the Dhamma. That's also completely wrong view when you really push it as to what it's there for. So you see, our selective process in wanting to look at the Dhamma based on our own proclivities and our own drives, that's very dangerous. And that's why this sutta is a dictionary, is a password, is the code with which we can decipher, with which we can understand and penetrate through and destroy our own ignorance. So the first person we talked about last week was the puthujjana, who simply looks at the world and sees it as it is. It's very solid, it's very real, it's very much unquestionably, identifiably concrete, such as the four elements we mentioned. They look at themselves. So that's another representation. When we talk about the four elements, we're also talking about material reality, but your identification with this thing called life, vis-a-vis your experiences with it, with the six senses, for example. We'll delve more today in it as well, because we're going to cover the 24 again, but through the eyes of the second type of person, who happens to be the Sekha. Now, here we see a different person, a different type of person, a person, in essence. Remember, this is a discourse giving to a bhikkhu, to a group of bhikkhus, but the Buddha is talking about the Sekha as the noble disciple in higher training. This is a person who has already seen the Dhamma. They have right view. They have right view. They are not taking somebody else as their teacher other than the Buddha. They have seen the truth of the Dhamma, but they have not broken free yet, meaning they still have certain fetters. Remember, the Sekha is any one of the three noble disciples. We have the stream winner, we have the once returner, and we have the non-returner. Okay, these three constitute the noble disciples that we refer to as Sekha in the suttas when we see Sekha. Now, next week, if all goes well and my health permitting, we'll do the third type of person, which is the Arahant. The Arahant is the Asekha, we'll see. Asekha means the person who is beyond training. They've completed the training. That means they are now released from suffering. They've experienced true, full Nibbāna in its truest sense. Okay? So that portion of the sutta we'll leave for next week. Hopefully, we'll be able to finish the Sekha portion today. And that's my goal. So today we'll be talking about the Sekha, the second type of a person. And if you're wondering what is the fourth type of person, last week I mentioned, that is the Tathagata. Okay, the Buddha. So coming back to the Sekha. Now, even though I mentioned this is pertaining to the noble disciple in higher training, someone who at least is of Sotapanna level, meaning at the most they will have to come back, be reborn at the most 7 more times. Not necessarily in the human realm, but they could be reborn in the heavenly realm, depending on their karma and their inclinations and their intentions and how they live their life and how much karma they have to get rid of, consequences they have to deal with. But even though that is the term, Sekha, but I would like you to do something with that, meaning please include yourselves in it, in the Sekha category. Could you do that? Where you see yourself also being addressed to by the Buddha when he says, let the noble disciple in higher training not be identified with this. Even though the Lord Buddha is talking to the Sekha, the noble disciple in higher training, please don't exclude yourself from being the recipient of such an instruction. Okay? Otherwise, really, it's going to be very much of a challenge. And what's the point, ultimately, one might ask? Well, it's not relevant to me if the person is not a Sekha. Okay? So my goal is to have everyone become a Sekha, at least on their way to becoming an Arahant. That's the whole point. That's why the Dhamma is taught. The Dhamma is not taught as literature, as learning a language, as learning philosophy. It's for you to become transformed and really taste the extinction of suffering, which is Nibbāna. So last week we saw what it was that the Buddha did not want us to live like, which is the puthujjana, the dense, ordinary, unlearned, blockheaded, ignorant person who doesn't have any regard for the noble ones, doesn't believe any of the Dhamma ultimately, doesn't care for it. And now we're talking about the Sekha. So please include yourself in there. So without further ado, I want to jump in because we have some territory to cover. So Majjhima Nikāya number 1, we'll do part 2 or week 2. The middle length discourses, Mūlapariyāya Sutta, the root pattern of behavior of all mind objects. So this is about the Sekha, the noble disciple in higher training. Excuse me. Here, Bhikkhus, the Sekha, who is a noble disciple in higher training, has not yet attained to his heart's deep desire, and thus, day and night, he keeps aspiring for the ultimate freedom that is release from being yoked, the true safety, the highest refuge. The deep desire here is that of freedom, freedom from pain, freedom from suffering, freedom from being yoked and attached. Imagine yourself just like the ox or the cow that has to carry that yoke, the heavy, heavy piece of wood around its neck and toil over, working the hours away, the days, weeks, months, until they no longer can pull the chariot or the hoe, whatever the farmer is using to cultivate the land. That's what we're doing. That's what we're carrying. It's heavier, in fact, than what the bull or the ox has to deal with. Our own wrong views. Every single thing you touch, with your eyes, with your ears, with your nose, with your tongue, with your body, with your mind, you're entering into them. Every single experience has been given the stamp of identity by us, where we are fixed. We are fixed into looking at them. We're looking at something that is rigid, something that is, especially the experiences that we like. Nandi raga is a term the Buddha would use. Nandi means delighting. Raga means passions, becoming hot towards something, really liking something. In this case, Nandi raga. That is a yoke that's terrible, that we cannot get rid of with everything that you see. Your eyes are always looking for something that is the pleasurable from all the other stuff that are not. We're always engaged in deciphering through and looking for things that are truly enjoyable, and then we want to put a frame around it and hang it up in our wall of experience. That is what we call the Panchupadana Khanda. These are the 5 aggregates that make up a person. Remember, Rupa, which is form, Vedana, which is feeling, Sanya, which is perception, Sankhara, which is habitual drives and tendencies that makes you want to do things, say things, think in line of those things, that patterns that come through your mind without any stops, any breaks. And then consciousness, vijnana. These are the 5. These are the 5 aggregates that we love to keep constructing things around. We like to inhabit each of these, turn them into our home, our residence, our domicile, and give our life meaning, a shadow to make it 3D, to stand out, to have significance. And that's what Lord Buddha would call conceit-based. Mana. And we have the constant drive of craving running the whole scene, the whole mechanism. But because of the absence of sati, we are drenched in ignorance. So you have ignorance, craving, and conceit running the whole scene, called life. From life to life. Of course, the patterns will change, the images will change, the tendencies of liking, the identifications will change. Contextual elements will change, but the drive itself will remain the same. This color of skin will change, the religion will change from life to life. The species will change, but the drive is the same. So when you're thinking about, why do I listen to the discourses? Why do I find myself meditating? Why am I even interested in the Dhamma? You need to ask yourself the question. That question first, and then say, what is the real purpose of that? Wanting to practice or listen and learn more of the Dhamma. Why? Is it because of the personality of the teacher or even the Buddha? No, it shouldn't be. It should not be. Or how beautiful the teaching is. Well, why is it beautiful? It has to have a purpose. It has to have the bottom line purpose of it should be to release you from suffering. That is vimutti. That is release from the yoke to these 5 aggregates. And that's what we're trying. That's dismantling. That's what this sutta is. That's what every sutta is, in fact. The dismantling of that wrong view, which is essential at making a person Sekha versus a puthujjana. So the first element is earth. For this reason, when looking at earth and all that has the solidity or material quality of the earth element, the noble disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying it, but instead observe and acknowledge it as being nothing other than just earth. Do you notice the difference here? Last week, we talked about the puthujjana. The puthujjana looks at the earth, solidity, material things, in relation to himself, herself. and sees it as, yeah, this is solid, this is earth. This can't be otherwise. So the Pali term is manyana. Manyana means imagining, fancying, putting more, using your creative license to make up stuff that don't exist. Anthropomorphizing, fancy word, to turn it into like human, having human characteristics. You look at the cloud, all of a sudden you want to make it look like a person, a being, a dragon, a this, or that, giving it human characteristics. Well, already you're sucked in to the story. You're creating the story. You're deluding yourself. That's what it is. It might make you feel fuzzy. Yeah, look at me. You might even start crying. But it doesn't mean it's real. This path is about reality, of penetrating through, because creativity will not lead you out of samsara. Let me tell you that. Imagination will not get you out of suffering. It won't. It will still keep you very much chained up. So here, mamanyi is the Pali term for what the Buddha is saying to the Sekha. Let him not imagine. Let him not. You can almost see his finger shaking it. Don't you? You should not imagine there to be things that don't exist. Remember, he's talking about the Sekha who is determined on breaking free. Thus, by seeing and understanding it through his higher knowledge, the noble disciple in higher training should not imagine nor objectify earth. This is key. Objectifying the thing, objectifying the experience. But simply look at earth as earth and nothing else. He should not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to earth. He should not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from earth. Because you could be apart, but, or like I was mentioning it to another student, the difference between distinctly different and apart. The way why I translated it like this is, think of twins. You have identical twins and you have fraternal twins. Fraternal twins, they are twins, but they don't look like each other. They're still separate though, right? They don't look anything like each other. One was tall, the other's short. One was fat, the other one's thin, etc. Hair color different. But when you talk about identical twins, they're identical, but they're still separate. See the distinctions there that I'm trying to make here. Remember, the translations that I am doing here is to inculcate, bring up in us I don't care about the linguistic or grammatical, how pristine, how clean, how etc. it is. It is what changes that are being brought up within you, what psychological, emotional, epistemological changes that are happening. Etymology, the meaning of words, ultimately, context is key. Context. And life is all about context. So we have to look at, especially the Dhamma, which is all context, in my opinion. So he should not imagine earth as something to be possessed. That's why even Nibbāna is not something to be possessed. You will not see anybody carrying a badge, a name tag that says Nibbāna, stage 3, stage 2. Lord Buddha never had a name tag that says Tathagata, Samma Sambuddho. He didn't have anything like that. Even the hair that people gave him. If you went into a time machine and you went back to Savatthi, let's say Lord Buddha was staying at Savatthi when you land there, and you go straight to Anathapindika's park, Jeta's park, Anathapindika's monastery, you see Ananda's tree there, and you look and you see the Theras, and you look, I think you will be hard-pressed to find Lord Buddha. Because he would look just exactly like the other bhikkhus. Shaven head. Surrounded by other bhikkhus. So there's nothing to really become identified with. So it's not something to be possessed, and therefore not to be considered as mine. In this way, you should not delight in nor because of earth. Oftentimes we rely on the happiness that we want to have has to meet certain requirements. That's what I mean by because of earth. We delay our own happiness because certain criteria have not yet been met. I met someone the other day who came by delivering something, and he looked sad, and I said, "Are you okay?" He said, "Oh, I just want to make another million so that I can get a house for my daughter, so I will stop working." And I said, "Do you have a house now?" He says, "Yes." In fact, he has more than one house. But in his mind, he wants to, he sees himself becoming happy when he has checked those boxes as well. Well, a decade ago, he had less boxes to check, which he completed them. So the person is delaying his own happiness, and he looks gloomy, working day and night. That is not the lifestyle of Sekha, because I told him, in fact, I said, how much of a guarantee do you have that you will survive until October, or I will be around until October? No one knows. But you do have now. Can't you invite happiness now in your life? He's like, yes, you're right, but. So don't make it a condition. This identifiable thing that you created as earth to be the constituent part, the thing itself that will give you joy, give you happiness. Similarly, this theme carries through all of the 24 concepts. Remember, even Nibbāna. Many people think that attaining Nibbāna, once that happens, then life will make sense for them. Once it happens, then I will be a saint. I will be at peace. Missing the whole point. That's not how it works. Because you're making it as a condition. Once I have Nibbāna, then my life, nothing can bother me. Nothing could shake my faith. Nothing. No, it's the other way around. You have to work. That's why we practice sila. That's why we practice sati, meditation, cultivation of mind, samadhi. And we seek wisdom by understanding and pushing the walls of our ignorance until they collapse. So we have insights. And once we do, already you're changing, you're preparing yourself, you're understanding moment to moment. And that is the thing that facilitates the experience of Nibbāna for you. Not the other way around. It is because the noble disciple in higher training guards himself well, for he knows that he still has more work to do in order to fully understand and directly comprehend it. This I declare. The parinyaya is in Pali, the term. Fully understand, comprehend. And that cannot be done without your own work. A book or a lecture, a Dhamma talk, a teaching will never be giving you that full comprehension if your ears are closed, if you're not putting the effort to try to understand at least. And that's what people were, and still are actually, doubtful that so many illiterate individuals who came listening to the Buddha attained so quickly. And then the justification that as to why that's not happening nowadays, the answer or justification of that I've heard from such individuals as being, well, those people had merits that far exceed the merits of those of us living today in the world. Basically, they were at the right place at the right time because of their right punyas or merits. And that's not true. They put the effort, and that's something that we're not doing these days. We put the effort to go ahead and rake more pleasure for our six senses, and from our six senses to give ourselves more joy and pleasure and more and more and more and less of pain. Well, if that's the mechanism, we won't penetrate through, and there won't be any parinyaya. There's not going to be full understanding, because you're very much satisfied with the way things are as a slave to the senses. And the Sekha is somebody who's already given up. They are disenchanted. They have Nibbāna. They are repulsed by the fickleness of the six senses. They change. None of them stays the same. It's like a backstabbing so-called friend. It's an assassin. You can't rely on any of your six senses or even your body. Now it's feeling amazing. Yeah, I'm not going to get sick. Yeah. And then, and then the weather changes and all of a sudden you're sick. But I was taking all these medicine. What happened? Health, the concept of health, holding on so tightly to that concept. Next is apo, which is water. Similarly, when looking at water and all that has the fluidity or cohesive quality of the water element, the noble disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying it, but instead observe and acknowledge it as being nothing other than just water. Remember, the four elements are proxy, is a name, placeholder basically for your body, your living experience. You can stretch it out to every facet of your body, your experiences that you get from your body, be they emotional, because you have emotions that feel like water, right? They're very liquidy, very fluidy. And then you have emotions that are very heavy. Very heavy. You can't budge them. You can't move them. They're not so flowery. They're not so mobile, so much in motion as in the air element. Anger is very much airy, but mostly fiery. There's another way of looking at the four elements. Similarly with the body. Sometimes your body feels like you don't want to move from the sofa. It's so heavy to move, even though it's the same body you had 5 minutes ago. So don't look at the four elements as something outside of you. This is a reference to you as a person living in this body. Similarly, when looking, by seeing and understanding it through his higher knowledge, the noble disciple in higher training should not engage nor objectify water, but simply look at water as water and nothing else. He should not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to water. He should not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from water. He should not imagine water as something to be possessed and therefore not to be considered as mine. In this way, he should not delight in nor because of water. And why is this the case? It is because the noble disciple in higher training guards himself well, for he knows that he still has more work to do in order to fully understand and directly comprehend it. This I declare. I'll do the fire and air as well, and then I'll pause. Similarly, while looking at fire and all that has the heating or temperature quality of the fire element, the noble disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying it, but instead observe and acknowledge it as being nothing other than just fire. Remember, I'm not using it just as fire. I also use a qualifier for that. experientially speaking, what does fire represent for the body? It's heat. In fact, the absence or presence of heat indicates the temperature changes. So that is how I would like you to approach the element of fire, tejo. For example, cold weather is the absence of the heat, depending on how low it goes, right? Or how high up it goes, the heat. Then you have excruciating heat. Now, the balance, the sweet spot is what we're looking for. So when you are, I remember when I was a few years ago in Asia and I was giving a retreat, some people came in and who were not from that part of the world, Southeast Asia, and they were complaining in their private interviews how they're struggling with the heat and humidity. For that person, it was very real. The heat, it was real. The tejo element, the fire element, was real. So automatically, when I say real, that means the person now is identified with the presence of scorching heat, and deep down they seek the opposite. What is the opposite of heat? Cold, cool. Oh, let me sit under the air conditioner. Well, let me sit right in front of the window. What happened there? The identification. Now you're going from one side of the pendulum to the other. This is another way of understanding how important it is to look at these not as things divorced from you, but very much the language with which you relate with and to life that you're living, which is drenched in identification with these phenomena, which we don't even think about. That's why it was making people uncomfortable. That's why they pushed away the sutta and anything like it that is deep, because it's questioning our own understanding of reality. When a person is talking about the four elements, they're able now to question at least. But we have to do more work. And the Buddha is saying exactly what that entails. Stop imagining it. Oh, Sekha, ma mani. The Sekha does not imagine. Ma means, let's say, if you're, don't touch. Don't touch. If a child is going to touch the fire, imagine that ma coming in from the parent and says, ma, don't. So that don't is what the Buddha is saying. Ma mani, don't imagine, don't fancy, don't make it more than it actually is. Now, by seeing and understanding it through his higher knowledge, the noble disciple in higher training should not imagine or objectify fire, but simply look at fire as fire and nothing else. He should not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to fire. Yeah, people who worship fire. He should not imagine himself being distinctly different from or nor apart from fire. He should not imagine a fire as something to be possessed and therefore not to be considered as mine. In this way, he should not delight in nor because of fire. Remember, these were practices at the time of the Buddha as well. So he was addressing bhikkhus, some of whom came from a tradition where they were worshiping fire as well. So there's that aspect of reality that the Buddha is also addressing, not the hermeneutical devices that he's using, not the explorative, symbolic meaning of fire. He was also talking about people who actually believed in the practice of fire as a legitimately religious practice that was going to get them to some type of attainment. And why is this the case? It is because the noble disciple in higher training guards himself well. This is the refrain portion. For he knows that he still has more work to do in order to fully understand and directly comprehend it. Thus, I declare. So the Sekha knows I still have work to do. That is also showing humility. because they see it as a process, as a changing process that's taking place constantly. So they have to improve upon that. So every time you sit to practice, to meditate, every time you're pondering the Dhamma, you are trying to understand, what does that mean? 4 elements. Well, what do you think the Buddha meant by this? Or listening, re-listening, and spending some time a day on your own really will allow you to penetrate through the mirage that the rest of your 24 hours are all about maintaining. 4th, air or wind, vayu. Similarly, while looking at water and all that has the moving or pressuring quality of the air or wind element, the noble disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying it, but instead observe and acknowledge it as being nothing other than just air. Now, by seeing and understanding it through his higher knowledge, the noble disciple in higher training should not imagine or objectify air, but simply look at air as air and nothing else. He should not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to air or wind, vayu. Basically, it means an opening. It could also be a reference, you can see it as a reference to the insides, your mouth, for example. It's hollow, right? Versus the tumultuous environment inside your stomach with hydrochloric acid churning inside, which is heat and also motion, right? And fluidity, liquidity, even though it's like car battery acid. He should not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from air. He should not imagine air as something to be possessed and therefore not to be considered as mine. In this way, he should not delight in nor because of air. And why is this the case? It is because the noble disciple in higher training guards himself well. This is key. That's why no one can push aside working and giving importance to the development of sila. Sila is important, even though I was explaining earlier how even there are people who objectify, make it the all in all of the practice, the sila, and forget about every other part of it, the teaching. That's also wrong. But we need to guard ourselves. Restraint. Sangvara is key. It's very important to keep the door shut when the door needs to be shut. That means you have to take the vitamin N, as I tell people. You have to take your daily vitamin N. That means saying no. Wise, compassionate, but very much strong and courageous no. That means when people call you from your past, that you don't enjoy their company or what they talk about or where they go and hang out. You don't see yourself in any way, shape, or form related to that anymore. You should put away your fears as to what it might mean, this and that. You don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and you just come out and say no, compassionately, wisely, responsibly to yourself first, because you have to live with yourself after you hang up the phone. So many of us say yes when we mean no. Restraint. I've seen so many people make mistakes by breaking sila. When you ask them, when they come to you and say, Bhante, I'm so sorry I did this, I'm like, okay, it's not a confessional booth coming to me. I'm a bhikkhu, you did it, it's okay. How do you feel? Like, I just can't process it with you, but I'm not going to absolve you of anything. It's kamma. We have a totally different set of realities that we have to consider. The person says, I feel stupid because I know I should have said no, but I did it. I said yes when I meant no. That means the person has holes instead of a boundary. They are like Swiss cheese. The boundary is like Swiss cheese with so many holes in it. Anything could come through. And you can't really blame the world outside as the problem. You have to patch up those holes by restraint. That's why the Buddha gave us the 5 precepts as a guide, as a training guide Ultimately, your happiness is number one. Remember that. Your peace is number one. You don't do this for me. You don't do it for definitely for the Buddha. You're doing this for you. So you have more ease and comfort and happiness. So the Sekha realizes that. Now we go to living beings, Bhuta. Similarly, while looking at living beings and all the diverse qualities about them, the noble disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying them, but instead observe and acknowledge them as being nothing other than just living beings. Don't make them into something that they are not. Now, by seeing and understanding it through his higher knowledge, the noble disciple in higher training should not imagine nor objectify living beings, but simply look at living beings as living beings and nothing else. He should not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to living beings. He should not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from living beings. See, he's talking about the balance. Stay in the middle. Don't turn them into something other than what they really are. Struggling beings, living beings that have to deal with their own karmic results, with their new karmas that they intentionally are committing, be they wise or unwisely based, skillful or unskillful. That's what you have around you. And the series of causal conditions that are all happening at the same time. So it's all a flux. There's nothing fixed. Anicca is happening all the time. Dukkha is happening, is there. And there is anatta. That means there is no substantial core to look for. Whether in yourself or the other person over there, you say, how come you changed? You were not supposed to change because I liked you like this. Why did you change? It's a ridiculous question to be asked. But if there is ignorance, of course it's going to be asked because it is wrongly placed. It is based on ignorance, delusion. Why? Because the person is refusing to acknowledge the fact that there is nothing that is concrete. There is nothing that is compact. The term in Pali is ghana. Ghana sanya. Ghana sanya means the perception of the compact. Compact means squeezed together. It's like concrete. It's like a structure of building. So we look at another person and say, oh, you're supposed to be like a building. You're not supposed to change. Or some changes here and there, it's okay, but not at the core. Well, what is that core? There's no core, the Buddha is saying. That is anatta. But why is there dukkha? Well, dukkha happens when we grab hold of anicca and say, don't be anicca. But don't change. It's like that person who grabs a whole bag of nails and a hammer and goes to the beach and starts nailing down the waves on the coast. I've seen this picture. It's a beautiful picture. It's online somewhere. It's so poignant, but that's what we're doing. We're nailing down waves. You see how ridiculous that is, right? Every time you look at something and say, but you're not supposed to be like this. You look at a flower, you say, but you're supposed to come out this way, open up this way. So Ghana Sanya is compact. It's all a flux, meanwhile. Changing, completely transitory. Nothing is stable. Okay, this is going to happen, right? Anicca. I was asking, well, why is there pain? The problem is we grab on to one or more elements and we want to, it's like pinching portion of the ocean and saying, I have ocean in my hand. I am tying, I'm okay, there's a wave, you get some strings and you tie, make a bow over the wave and say, aha, I grabbed hold of the ocean, of the wave. I have the wave in my hand. You know how ridiculous that is. You cannot do that. But that's what we're doing with every moment of experiencing life. Whether through the forms we see, rupa, whether it's through the feelings we have, good, bad, neutral, whether it's the perceptions we have, memories we have, whether it's the sankharas we have, which are the habitual drives. You have a thought and you all of a sudden want to blurt it out. You have an idea, something in your mind you want to say, and you open your lips and you say, what is that? That was a sankhara which you could not restrain. The sankhara was running the show. You became the glove suddenly, and the hand, meaning the sankhara, was moving you because there's ignorance. There's no restraint on your part. And then there's the vijnana. We have become worshippers of vijnana. The Buddha says, Sabbe Dhamma Nalang Abhinivesaya. Nothing deserves to be entered into. Entry point, you know, the foyer of a house, when you walk into a house, the entry, the corridor, the hallway. Think of it like you've already, if you're there, you're inside the house. Any experience, good, bad, painful, pleasurable, neutral, when you wear it, that's another way of saying entering into. When you take that on, that's another term for identification. That means you've been had, you fooled yourself. And that's another way of understanding the Panchupadana Khanda. The grabbing of the five aggregates as mine, as me. Whether it's craving, whether it's conceit, whether it's ignorance. They're all the same, ultimately, because they're taking you straight to dukkha. So anicca was happening. One way to relate to this is by looking at someone else who's not looking at the same situation as you. And you look at their behavior, you ask them how they're feeling about it. And sometimes you're going to be surprised because it didn't make a dent on them. They're not affected as you. Why? Because they also were exposed to the same factors. Why? This is another way of understanding sunyata, emptiness, the voidness. Voidness of what? Voidness of your ignorance. Voidness of attachment. Voidness of nimittas and signs and features. Remember, when we're talking about things experienced, we're talking about sights that are visible, sounds that are audible, smells that you can sense, smell, odors, fragrances, taste, flavors you can taste, things that you can touch, objects you can touch, surfaces, and thoughts that you can cognize. That's basically, those are the objects that make up portion of the six sense spheres. Your senses are the other, internal, and these are external. But the problem is we take these and we go into them. We look at some feature and we become infatuated by them. Take any poetry, take any poem, take any creative endeavor. One of the funniest things is to go and talk to an artist during their exhibit. When Salvador Dali, who was worshipped in the 70s, 80s, etc., before his death, it was so ridiculous. He didn't even know what he was doing. And in the exhibitions that he would have, the galleries people would have, and he would go sometimes sneak behind people and hear these very artsy, creative type people who pretended to be very smart and, knowledgeable about art. And they would start looking at a painting that he did, and Dali would come behind just to eavesdrop, to listen what they're saying about this work. And they would make stories, oh, this is a this is a mermaid, this is a this is a that, like Picasso's the same thing. And, oh, wow, yeah, I could see that. And then people asked Dali, and he would start laughing and walk away to another group. And he would say, why are you laughing? He says, I don't know what they're talking about, because I had no idea I was doing anything. I was just actually doing drugs. I was doing this, and I just started messing around with the canvas. People make up stuff. Delusion, through and through. And oh yeah, it's like the emperor's new clothes. The same thing we had in COVID, right? People see this is ridiculous, this is nuts, this is stupid, but hey, everybody's buying it. Let's buy in. If I don't buy into it, then they're going to think I'm strange. I don't want to be left out. I don't want to come across as a Sekha. A Sekha is unafraid. A Sekha is simply wise enough to say, I don't want to hurt anymore. I don't buy this nonsense. I don't buy these lies, these six senses that what they're offering me as truth. They're not true because they're changing. They're changing. Well, I don't want to go and buy that new car because I have one over. Yeah, but this is a new one. Why new? Why? Devas are divine beings. Similarly, while looking at devas in all their divine and heavenly qualities, the noble disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying them, but instead observe and acknowledge them as being nothing other than just devas. Devas in other cultures, people might say angels. And some people are shocked to know, oh, you Buddhists believe in devas, in gods and God? And I say, no, not in God, in a God, but in gods. And no, they are not what they are in other religions, where they're like the all in all or supreme being type of a thing. There, we don't have, because where's the supremeness in your beingness when you're going to die at the end of that supreme divine beingness of yours in a heavenly realm? Because you're going to croak and die. Where's the godliness in you? It means nothing. Yeah, it's just like a dog is born as a dog and the flea is born as a flea on the back of the dog. You happen to be born as a god in a heavenly realm. Big deal. That's about as significant as it can be when looked at from the Dhamma's point of view. But nevertheless, not to insult the devas here, but we don't make them into something other than what they are. We don't wear amulets, we don't wear, ideally, even though I have to stand corrected, because when I was in Sri Lanka and other places, in Nepal and other parts of the Buddhist world, I was surprised because right before you enter the temple, there's a big statue of some divinity. And you ask, it's a deva, it's a this, it's a deva of this. And I was like, but what is, like, where does the Buddhist element come in? Oh, these are just protectors. People are people. Not everyone is going to be really delving into the Dhamma for the sake of the Dhamma. So that's another reason why the Buddha is explaining that devas are not seen as more than what they are, just devas. They still have ignorance, you know. If you remember last year, I think it was, when we covered Bhakka, Brahma Nimantaka Sutta, Bhakka Brahma, who thought he was the all in all, the God Almighty. And the Buddha, I think I mentioned him last week also. Perfect example of ignorance. And just like Lord Buddha was teaching Rahula or any other person, he ended up teaching Brahma God, Bhakka, to break through his ignorance. And fortunately for him, he did. The light went on in his head, despite being Maha Brahma, you know? So you should not imagine devas as something to be possessed and therefore not to be considered as mine. In this way, you should not delight in nor because of devas. Now, you have examples in unfortunately some parts of Buddhist countries where even monks, there is the tradition of tattooing chants and things and spells on their bodies. First of all, it's a no-no. It's absolutely not allowed. But culturally, they add these because they say, well, that so-and-so was an Arahant and he had them. It's like the smoking of cigarettes, you know, with some people who call themselves Arahants. these are, the pictures of or names of devas on their bodies so that they can be protected. Well, where does that leave whole anicca, dukkha, anatta business with this body? What are you protecting this body from? With spells? And what does that say about your understanding of the sasana? So you see, the ignorance is broad. So you have to even ask and question these phenomena and not accept them blindly. Always put them next to the Dhamma and see if they hold their truth, if they hold water. Because if they are not Dhamma, they will collapse. And you don't need to justify anything. The Dhamma itself will do the job. Just be honest with what you're seeing and calling it out the way it is. Progenitor. By the way, I'm skipping, and why is that section where it says, it is because a noble disciple in higher training guards himself well, for he knows that he still has more work to do in order to fully understand and directly comprehend them. Direct comprehension is key. This is not faith-based religion. This is not believing in anyone. This is you understanding clearly and fully. Comprehension. Pariyāya. We have to understand. Okay? That has to be there. That's the changer. That's the transformational quality that will get you to become a Sekha. You don't become otherwise sitting there and doing nothing and just by a miracle or a blessing falling into your lap. It doesn't work like that. Progenitor, predecessor to all beings. This was an idea that was there in the Hindu and Vedic cosmology. To this day, there are in some religions, some factions, different places. In that culture, it was called Pajapati. So similarly, while looking at Pajapati, the progenitor and predecessor to all beings, the noble disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying him, but instead observe and acknowledge him as being nothing other than just Pajapati. Now, this does not mean Lord Buddha is acknowledging the fact that there is a progenitor. This is a question that sometimes people get confused about. Remember, the Buddha is addressing the common concepts at the time that people held dear and near to their hearts. And that's why I say some of this list of 24, you're going to find, you share some of that in your own language, in your own interest, in your own, contemporaneous version of it. Now, by seeing and understanding it through his higher knowledge, the noble disciple in higher training should not imagine or objectify Pajapati, but simply look at Pajapati as Pajapati and nothing else, etc. So I'm going to go ahead because it's the same message with the other ones coming up. Brahma. Similarly, while looking at Brahma, the noble disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying him, but instead observe and acknowledge him as being nothing other than just Brahma. Now, by seeing and understanding it through his higher knowledge, the noble disciple in higher training should not imagine or objectify Brahma. You can switch the name. If it doesn't mean anything to you, Brahma, you can substitute it with God. In some cases where people have taken the Buddha as this primordial or a being, in fact, living in some part of the cosmos in a different dimension, you can even take that image, because that's also false. You can turn that and put that in here instead. Do not objectify Brahma, he says, or you could say even the Buddha. But simply look at Brahma as Brahma and nothing else. He should not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to Brahma. He should not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from Brahma. He should not imagine Brahma as something to be possessed and therefore not to be considered as mine. In this way, he should not delight in nor because of Brahma. And this is another reason why the Buddha avoided or discouraged directly individuals who were beginning to worship him for the sake of being devotional, which you see today also and all across the centuries since then. And that's why the Buddha did not isolate himself in some tower, some shrine, and pretend to be something he wasn't. But unfortunately, people being people, we like to turn such a character into a godlike figure that is untouchable, that is beyond the realm that we know as normal. Despite the fact that he wore robes that were made up of rags, he ate normal food. His back hurt. He had to shave his beard, his head. You know, he had gray hair at the end of when he was aged. He had eye bags. That's normal. But that shatters the image that some people have of what the Buddha is. He's supposed to be so regal, so beautifully seated, and it's like he shouldn't be slouching at all. Well, if you have gravity and you have age and you have a spine and you've been walking for hundreds of thousands of miles across India, as Madhya Pradesh, are you kidding me? Of course he's going to slouch. He's going to have his back hurt. He wasn't practicing, stretches all the time. He was normal. But that makes us uncomfortable because we have made him into our savior, our superhero. That's nothing could be further from the truth. There needs to be understanding. Next is devas of streaming radiance, abhasara deva. Again, we went through all of these last week. Now the changes that are happening here in their reintroduction, the 24 principles, is the Sekha's own, the instruction that is given to Sekha now, because he's still a disciple in training. Next week, we'll see the Arahants who are beyond the training. Then the Buddha, is going to make a statement about the Arahant's position and understanding. He won't be telling the Arahant, don't do this, like he is now saying, cautioning the Sekha. You see the difference? So there's a hierarchy here. One is the puthujjana, okay? The dullard, the one who's not caring about seeing things for what they are. Now we're seeing today the Sekha, and next week we'll see the Arahant. So here the Buddha is still giving advice. That's what I mean, because the Sekha still has some work to do. Abhasara devas, because some of the Sekhas we're seeing the devas of the Abhasara realm. They are very much glowing, very much luminescent, streaming radiance. And sometimes when they would hear the Buddha mention them, or they themselves would see them, they were like awed by that, almost dropping down to worship them, unless they were wise enough to see, no, these are just beings like myself, but from a different dimension. So you should not go on engaging in imagining them, mamanyi, or fancying them, but simply look at the Abhasara devas as the Abhasara devas and nothing else. He should not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to the Abhasara devas. He should not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from the Abhasara devas. He should not imagine the Abhasara devas as something to be possessed and therefore not to be considered as mine. In this way, he should not delight in nor because of the Abhasara devas. You have individuals who would hear the stories about these beings the next morning when the Buddha would relate to them. This is what happened, bhikkhus. Last night, a group of countless Abhasara devas came in, and one of them approached and asked a question. So some of them, you can imagine, some of these bhikkhus were drooling with excitement, with thirst, with so much craving, and saying, I wish I was awake. Bhante, how come you didn't wake me up? I wanted to see them. I wonder when I would see them. Oh, I would like to be reborn in that realm, which is a big no-no. Because you are saying, I still want to stay in samsara. So you're going to notice here, last week you saw it, I hope. Today we're seeing it, that the Buddha is not eager to keep any one of these in the same group, in this group. He wants to get them out of samsara, to break the chains of the yoke, to set you free from suffering, from these attachments that we have. Compactness, the idea of ghanasanya, where we solidify these ideas and say, ah, yes, I would like that, and it's going to be forever. Like the Disney-esque way of thinking. They lived happily ever after. There is no such thing ever. It's created by delusion, nonsensical, childish, infantile way of thinking that can and will ruin the rest of your life if you follow such a deception. That's why this is called the mature path for the wise people. So he's saying, no, the devas should just be seen as devas, and that's it. Lovely beings from a different realm. But you should go beyond. That means break through. Because even the devas are there so that they can break free. They also see they're tired of being devas. They want to break free and attain release from re-becoming, birth after birth. Next is the devas of lustrous beauty, Subhakinha devas. So the Buddha says the disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying them, but instead observe and acknowledge them as being nothing other than just devas of lustrous beauty. But looking at them as the Subhakinha devas and nothing else. He should not imagine himself existing in or in relation to the Subhakinha devas. He should not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from the Subhakinha devas. He should not imagine the Subhakinha devas as something to be possessed or therefore to be considered as mine. In this way, he should not delight in nor because of them. Why? Because he still has more work to do. Okay, there is no stop until you've passed the finish line. You can't even stand in front of the finish line. Have you ever thought of that? Imagine you've reached the finish line after miles and miles of running on your knees and elbows, and finally you made it, and you're standing just a centimeter away from crossing the finish line. Cross it. Cross it. That's the message the Buddha is saying. Cross the Ogha, the flood. No one else will do it for you. No one will carry you on their shoulder. No one can. Everybody has to carry their own burden. Everybody has to carry themselves across the flood of delusion, of craving, of conceit, of wrong views. Next are the devas of limitless fruit, Vehapala devas. So in seeing them, we should not engage in imagining or fancying them, but instead observe and acknowledge them as being nothing other than just devas of limitless fruit. So he mentions the same thing. You should not imagine himself being distinctly different. Please have the PDF is ready, print it out, and go over them closely, slowly. Next is Overlord or Mahabrahma Abhibhuta. Similarly, while looking at the Overlord Abhibhuta and all his divine qualities, the noble disciple should not engage in imagining or fancying him, but instead observe and acknowledge him as being nothing other than just the Overlord. So he should not see nor imagine the Overlord as something to be possessed and therefore not to be considered as mine. Therefore, he should neither delight nor because of nor because of the Overlord. Why is this the case? It is because the noble disciple in higher training guards himself well, for he knows that he still has more work to do in order to fully understand and directly comprehend him. This I declare. Now we get to the jhanic levels. the attainments of the specifically the formless realms of or dimensions of jhanas, beyond the sensual. Sphere, dimension of infinity of space. Akasananjana Chayatana Sutta. Sutta. This is what happens when you have so many suttas translating. You get the point. Dimension of infinity of space. Similarly, while looking at the sphere or dimension of infinity of space and its qualities, the noble disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying it, but instead observe and acknowledge it as being nothing other than just a sphere or dimension of infinity of space. It's an attainment. It's an experience. It's like you walking through a mansion, and in order for you to get from the living room, you have to walk through a hallway that takes you to the kitchen, and from there you need to take the stair step ladder to take you to the first story, first floor. As you're going in, you're not attaching yourself to the hall or the corridor. And then, so you pass, you're not stuck. You don't sit there on a sofa and stay, okay, for the rest of your life. Similarly, you go through the kitchen. You don't stand there. You don't just keep hoarding yourself with food, and you're going to get stuck there and not be able to pass any further. No, you need to pass through so you can go up the stair step ladder. So you can look at them in those compartments, in that, using such an image. These are just an image I'm sharing with you. It could be, you could have something better, your own version of it, but you do not linger in any of these states. So he doesn't see it as anything other than what it is, nothing else. He should not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to the dimension of infinity of space. Because when it happens, when the meditator experiences that, it makes them feel very uneasy. First, what typically would happen with many people is they drop out because it's very unusual. They feel like they're at the edge of a cliff, but they're not dying. It's just, it's nice. It's expansive, but it's also can be terrifying for some people because they've, in their mind, they've turned it into something. Oh, it's happening to me. Oh, let me go and tell this to some other, when they come out, especially. And then when they do get into it a few times, they develop a relationship to it. They like it. They want to repeat it. And that's what the Buddha is trying to warn against. He says, you should not imagine the dimension of infinity of space as something to be possessed, and therefore not to be considered as mine. In this way, you should not delight in, nor because of the sphere or dimension of infinity of space. And why is this the case? It is because the noble disciple in higher training guards himself well, for he knows that he still has more work to do in order to fully understand and directly comprehend it. Next is the infinity of consciousness, vijnana chayatana state. Ayatana is the sphere or dimension of. Similarly, while looking at the sphere or dimension of infinity of consciousness and its qualities, this is the next stage in the jhanic, in the formless jhanas. They're very subtle. Okay, you have the tangibility, the form structure is missing here. That's why we call them formless. If you're holding on to the concept that things have to have dimensions to them, even though we use the word dimension, but it's, you look for hard edges to touch, to grab hold, to keep your sense of identity, you're going to fall out of these states because they do the opposite, because they're trying to help you to let go of your sense of solidity, the solidity of an I-ness, a my-ness. I am this-ness. This is what the Dhamma is supposed to be. All these concrete ideas are dropping off as you're getting here. Otherwise, you cannot enter these states. You cannot pass through them because you're too rigid. So the Sekha will not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to the dimension of infinitive consciousness. And here the consciousness is really spreading. It becomes very porous. They're expanding. The person has a difficulty identifying where they stop and the other person begins. And it's a lovely state to pass through, to break through, to help you break through the sense of a solid identity of a self. You should not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from the dimension of infinitive consciousness. You should not imagine the dimension of infinitive consciousness as something to be possessed, and therefore not to be considered as mine. In this way, you should not delight in nor because of it. Sphere of nothingness. Akincanyayatana. Similarly, while looking at the sphere of dimension of nothingness and its qualities, the noble disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying it, but instead observe and acknowledge it as being nothing other than just a sphere of or dimension of nothingness. This is the seventh jhana, formless jhana. By seeing and understanding it, the noble disciple looks at it as nothing other than that dimension of nothingness, nothing more, nothing less. He should not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to the dimension of nothingness. So you don't go around telling people, I am entering the dimension of nothingness. Today I was sitting in nothingness for 7 hours. Oh yes, tonight when I go home after the traffic jam, I'm going to eat a good pizza and then I'm going to sit in nothingness until next. No, 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 no. You're far away from nothingness. So this is all personal. If you are truly experiencing that, the only person you should be talking to, if, and that's a big if, is supposed to be your teacher. That's it. Because it's a phase, it's a stage. You're not turning into your house, your domicile. You're not turning it into your dwelling, living space. It's helping you. It's a restful stop. It's a station of rest. If you've ever traveled long on a bus or a car or a train, you get to a place, you just get out and you shake your leg, just relax somewhere. And also it's a good reminder that you're on the right path. So there's signposts, restful signposts, nothing else. Allowing you to have more faith in yourself, that you've gone so far from where you were. It's wonderful because it gives you the confidence to strive on and to continue, because it reminds you that you are on the right path. There's nothing to be confused about because Lord Buddha is talking about it. Now, do you see why I'm having us go through these discourses? They're the map that the Buddha gave us. We can still use them. They're as good as they were 26 centuries ago. They will help you cross the flood, guaranteed, if you follow the directions he's giving. Sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. Neva sanyana sanyayatana. Similarly, while looking at the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception and its qualities, the noble disciple in high training should not engage in imagining or fancying it, but instead observe and acknowledge it as being nothing other than just the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception. That's it. This is the 8th jhana. Again, it's like, okay. Now, by seeing and understanding it, he should not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception. He should not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from it. He should not imagine it nor as something to be possessed and therefore not to be considered as mine. So he should not delight in nor because of it. Next, we get to what is seen, ditthi, which is a wonderful lesson which we cannot overstress. Remember, this is dite dhamattang, sute sutamattang, mute mutamattang, vinyate vinyatamattang. When seeing, just see. When hearing, just hear. When sensing, smelling, tasting, touching, just sense. Don't add your commentary to it. When knowing, just know. Don't be sucked into its detail by analyzing it to bits. No. Be a mirror is another good analogy here. Reflecting, just see it for what it is. So that is the first one, ditthi. This is, you can tell that when the Buddha is talking about this, the intensity or the depth of Dhamma has really gone profound. You can tell from the instructions, otherwise Lord Buddha would stop. He would not even get here. So he started them from, if you notice, from basic 4 elements. Then he went to the devas, and then he went to the jhānas, and then he went where? The reality of experience. This is the message that he gave to Bahya, remember. Bahya, when seeing, there is just seeing. This is what he's now teaching. He cannot teach this to the puthujjana. Last week he mentioned the puthujjana because the puthujjana is clueless about these things. And that's what he said. The puthujjana cannot understand that. But here, though, the Sekha is still on the path. He's persevering. He's protecting himself. He's going deeper. While looking at what is seen and all that has the quality of being visible or seen and observed by the eyes, the noble disciple in high training should not engage in imagining or fancying it, but instead observe and acknowledge it as being nothing other than just what is seen. You do not get pulled into what is seen. The forms, rupa. But mind you, Lord Buddha talks about 11 categorization of what is seen. That is, it could be internally based or it could be external. It could be from the past or the future. It could be gross or small. It could be beautiful or ugly. So you see the variations. Do not get pulled into the storyline. Even though the world is, and the surrounding that you have, the influences, will try to make you feel like you're not doing your due diligence to be pulled into that. You're supposed to. If you have eyes, you need to be sucked into the fine details. No, you don't. No, you don't. The Dhamma is saying, no, you don't. The Buddha is saying, no, you don't. Do not get pulled in. Do not get sucked in. Don't make the scene, the object, become other than or more than or deeper than what it really is. And the way to do that, to be pulled in, is to identify a feature, an aspect of it, and then you run with it. You make it bigger. That's a tiny little pebble that turns into a massive snowball coming down snow mountain. It builds up, builds up. That's what we do. And the Buddha is saying to the Sekha, don't do that. But simply look at what is seen as what is seen and nothing else. He should not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to what is seen. He should not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from what is seen. He should not imagine what is seen as something to be possessed and therefore not to be considered as mine. In this way, he should not delight in nor because of what is seen. Careful. And why is this the case? It is because the noble disciple in higher training guards himself well. When bhikkhus would go to see the Buddha, those who were truly Sekhas and those who were the Arahants, they would ask themselves. The Arahants didn't have to deal with it, but the Sekhas definitely had to because they're still training. It's no surprising why some of them would stop and ask themselves, why am I going to see the Buddha? Is it because he represents something solid? Am I going to fall on him as my refuge? Am I going to worship him and adore him and somehow hope that that some of his awakening, illumination is gonna get rubbed off on me, and I'm going to become awakened by simply associating with him, like the spoon that's in a hot, warm, delicious soup. No. So he had to question himself, his motives. That's another way of protecting. Because the Sekha is still very much in the world, still, so long as they're not Arahants. So they have a work to do ahead of them. What is heard? Sutta. Similarly, while looking at what is heard and all that has the quality of being heard or listened to and observed by the ears, the noble disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying it, but instead observe and acknowledge it as nothing other than just what is heard. When hearing, just hear. But why? Why? When seeing, just see. When hearing, just hear. When touching or sensing, just sense. When knowing, just know. Why? What's the problem with that? What's so wrong with getting into features, right? Sanya is wrong about it. Sanya, perceptions, because sanya is going to keep you agitated. You will never attain arahantship. You will never attain any level, even sotapatti, guaranteed, if the mind is agitated. In fact, if your mind is agitated, you cannot go even in the first jhana proper and experience it. If there is palpitation, shaking, sanyas create friction. Sanyas create heat. Sanyas create agitation, turmoil. And this path is teaching us how, as you're deepening your practice, the mind is becoming calm. That's why high emotionality is out of the question. Being moved into tears is out of the question. A true Arahant cannot sit there and sob, for example. If they're real Arahants, they cannot do that. It's impossible. There's a serenity that's developing. Agitation is no longer there. But what is agitation? Where is it coming from? First, there needs to be perception. That's why when the practitioner is able to enter into the state of Sanya Vedaita Nirodha Samapatti, which is the cessation of feelings and perceptions, there's no shaking. And oftentimes we see in the suttas and the discourses in Theravada and Therigatas, you see how when the person entered into that state, on coming out of it, the mind inclines towards Nibbāna. And many a time they actually attain full awakening right then and there. Because the mind has so prepared itself during that state of non-agitation. So that's why we are not allowing the mind to go into its features of whatever it is that it saw, it heard, it sensed. No, just drop it where it was, acknowledge it, yes, and move on. Now, by seeing and understanding it through his higher knowledge, the disciple and noble disciple in higher training should not imagine or objectify what is heard, but look at it as what it is, just heard, nothing else. Moving on, because it's the refrain. What is sensed? Mutta. Similarly, while looking at what is sensed and all that has the quality of being sensed or picked up and observed by the nose, tongue, or body, that's all mutta, by the way, sensing. The noble disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying it, but instead observe and acknowledge it as being nothing other than just what is sensed. And even if the mind drifts, oh, that smells like the baking that my grandmother used to do during that time of the year. Catch yourself thinking like that, in mid-sentence, as it were. There's nothing wrong with that. You're not punishing. It's not, you're You don't have a pejorative or punitive approach to yourself. Oh, yeah, I let my mind drift into the features. No, 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 no. You relax. Because that's also going to create agitation. Our objective is not to have that, right? So relax and be observant of the fact that your mind was drifting into the details. So now you turn the gaze on that. This is wisely using the mind to observe itself. This is vipassana. This is at the core of vipassana. And you're seeing how it rises and disappears, appears and disappears, appears and disappears, until you start seeing the disappearing aspect of it. And then you're able to get your mind so agile, so able to see, pick up. No matter how fast the sensations are, the thoughts are, experiences are, you're able to catch the ending of each of those. And then you get discouraged about attaching yourself to them. This is basically the opposite of nandiraga, which I was mentioning earlier, the delighting and passioning, having passion. Instead, you will have Nibbāna and viraga. Nibbāna is revulsion, is disenchantment. You get, again? But that's what's happening with the six sense doors. There's always like, oh boy, again, again. Oh, look at that, look at that. Okay, what is, oh, okay, again. Yeah, but that's lovely. That's a different flavor. Oh, look, again. Eventually, you're not saying again and again, by the way. I'm just, you get tired because your mind is there observing, and that creates dispassion. The passion starts fading away that used to be there. And then you start seeing that becoming passionate or staying passionate about things or looking for things to be passionate about in life is not life. It's torture. And then your mind starts to rest, to settle, and you start becoming okay with the way things are without looking for those spikes or those peaks of experiences and avoiding the valleys. No, no, no. You just start to go like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm more rested. So he simply looks at what is sensed as what is sensed and nothing else. He should not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to what is sensed, etc. What is known or cognized, viññāta. Similarly, while looking at what is known or cognized and all that has the quality of being known or cognized and observed by the mind, these are thoughts, ideas, memories, concepts, perceptions, you name it. Anything that you can become aware of mentally. Even those senses, sensory input that you got from the eyes, the ears, the nose, etc. Because the reason why you get to dwell on those is through the function of the mind, isn't it? The memory has kicked in. It's turning that sense of the sight into something more than it was. And that's what, you need to not engage in by imagining or fancying it, but instead observe and acknowledge it as being none other than just what is known, period. So he should not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to what is known. He should not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from what is known. He should not imagine what is known as something to be possessed and therefore not to be considered as mine. In this way, he should not delight in nor because of what is known. And why is this the case? It is because noble disciple in higher training guards himself well, for he knows that he still has more work to do in order to fully understand and directly comprehend it. Parinyāya, this I declare. Unity or oneness, ekata, actually. Similarly, while looking at and seeing unity in all things and all that has the quality of oneness, the noble disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying it, but instead observe and acknowledge it as being nothing other than just unity or oneness. You have traditions like that, like in Taoism, you have in other traditions, not animism, but where they say the one, the whole, the force, something like that, if you followed Star Wars in that tradition. These are identifications, nevertheless. in one way or another, at least experientially, at least rather emotionally. You might not give it or use the linguistic device to describe it, but nevertheless, you feel like there's a oneness, a unity, and that becomes very palatable for the person who's still attached to solidity, who's still attached to identification. And that is dangerous. And that's the same thing as taking in your mind the concept of a God. People today, billions of people today, believe that when they die, they're going to go to heaven, sit next to God, not too far, hopefully, and they're going to be having a blast, party, and just for the rest of, well, forever. They believe this. They believe this. And that is a perfect example of identification with something that is based on unwise attention as to what's really happening. Because that's all wishful thinking based on untruths, things that are not true. Because there's the lack here that I want to complete later over there. This is bhavatanha, the wanting to re-become again, which is a Sekha is also trying to get rid of. It's one of the fetters, The craving for re-becoming is one of that. You have Sekhas that when, they hope that when they die, they will go to a heavenly realm where they can complete the task. Or they're tired of living in the human world. They're not happy. They just want to take a time out and go and finish the job in another favorable set of circumstances. That's still a fetter, a fine, subtle fetter. It's a bond, it's a shackle. Still, it's ignorance. Next is the opposite of unity or oneness is multiplicity or diversity or not being one, nanatta. Similarly, while looking at and seeing the multiplicity of all things and all that has the quality of variety, the noble disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying it, but instead observe and acknowledge it as being nothing other than just multiplicity or diversity. That's it. Nothing to be worshipped, nothing to go crazy about, nothing to go fighting about. Now, by seeing and understanding it through his higher knowledge, the noble disciple in higher training should not imagine or objectify multiplicity or diversity, but simply look at diversity as nothing and nothing else. He should not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to diversity. He should not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from diversity. He should not imagine diversity as something to be possessed and therefore not to be considered as mine. In this way, he should not delight in nor because of that sense of diversity or multiplicity, the all. Similarly, while looking at and seeing the all or everything that is witnessed, the noble disciple in higher training should not engage in imagining or fancying it, but instead observe and acknowledge it as something, as being nothing other than just the all. Again, these were principles that people, it's very ephemeral, it's very foggy, it doesn't have any edges to it, no definite, godlike entity to be worshiping. Nevertheless, you're accepting everything. So it could be a theory also. You have people who are in love with scientism, which is another form of religious fanaticism, because you're believing blindly. You're no longer a scientist because you're believing in it blindly, and you start negating any scientific research that really happens. Because why? Because you believe in this thing, irrespective of what your data is saying, your observations are saying. Because there's an identification again. Even though science as such, right, is not a deity, is not a thing, but people's attitude, that's what the Buddha is presenting here, different concepts. But again, the common denominator is the person's delusion vis-a-vis that thing. In this case, it could be, I'm using the example of science, it could be economics, it could be financial success, it could be family, right? Many people adore their families, many people adore their ancestry, many people adore their race, right? Our race is the best, our people are the best, we are the best of the best. For them, the idiots, that's what they think. That's what people have. When there is no wisdom, that's what's going to happen. It could be any ism, communism, capitalism, this ism, that ism. You can substitute, as I said in the beginning, any of these principles with whatever is contemporary today, but holding still to the ignorance that's mutually inclusive to all of these. You should not imagine the all as something to be possessed, etc. Why? Because in order the Sekha guards himself well, for he knows that he still has more work to do in order to fully understand and directly comprehend it. This I declare. Finally, Nibbāna. Similarly, on having already tasted and known Nibbāna directly, the noble disciple in higher training should not imagine nor view Nibbāna as being this other. Now remember, this is totally different than the phrasing that the Buddha used for the puthujjana. The puthujjana has not tasted nor known Nibbāna directly. That's what makes the Sekha Sekha. The Sekha is a person, is a noble disciple in training. Asekha would be beyond training. Sekha is someone who's still training. When we say Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami, when you're taking the precepts, Sekha, Sikha, the same root is there for training. But here, this individual has tasted Nibbāna. They've seen it momentarily. They know it's there. Imagine you are looking into a bowl or at the bottom of a pool that's covered in gold coins. But everyone around you believes there's no gold underneath. You also were one of them until something happens. Somebody comes in with a powerful, let's say, or they light up, I don't know, they drop a rock, big boulder into it, while everyone else is looking away. You're still looking at the bottom of the pool, and the rock splashes, it goes to the bottom, and momentarily there's a splashing of water, and you see the bottom of the pool, and you see gold. You see the brilliant gold shining at you. You're completely stunned. And now everybody turns and says, "What was that?" And you say, "Gold, gold, gold." And they laugh at you. Will that person ever be fooled into thinking that there's no gold at the bottom? The metaphor might work, might not work, but in the case of the Sekha, it works. Because once they have tasted Nibbāna, that's the noble disciple on the first stage I'm talking about, the Sotapanna. That's what locks them on. They are locked on. Target. They know Nibbāna. Nobody will ever convince them otherwise, because they have seen the bottom of the pool. They have seen the gold. They have seen the light. They have seen the sun through the clouds. They have seen the mountaintop. That's another metaphor that's used in the commentaries, where somebody's traveling up a steep mountain and everybody's laughing at them, but they have faith in their hearts. Something is pulling them. They know. And as they're making this curve, up this steep curve on the mountain, at that moment, the weather clears and they catch a glimpse of the mountaintop, the peak that they're after, that they have to traverse these mountains to get to. They see the mountaintop top for the first time, but it's gone as they go up, continue. Everybody who comes in and says, no, come back down, there's no such thing, stop wasting time, impossible to convince them from continuing on their journey. And that is Sotapanna, which drives that person to become a Sakadagami, that drives the person to become a non-returner, that drives the person to become an Arahant. So that's why Lord Buddha is saying he has already tasted and known Nibbāna directly. So the noble disciple in higher training should not imagine nor view Nibbāna as being this other, anya. There's a temptation, of course, that you want to separate yourself from all the other guys around the pool that didn't see it. Well, yeah, I know where the goal is. I know. There's no such conceit. Ultimately, where you can maintain that conceit and still be an Arahant. It doesn't work like that. It has to be dropped. So Lord Buddha is advising the Sekha not to have craving, conceit, and views anymore. Wrong views about Nibbāna. Now, by seeing and understanding it through his higher knowledge, the noble disciple in higher training should not objectify Nibbāna nor imagine it as a separate thing called Nibbāna as such, Nibbāna, that is out there. He should not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to Nibbāna. He should not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from Nibbāna. He should not imagine Nibbāna as something to be possessed and therefore not to be considered as mine. This he must do so that he does not become restless nor get intoxicated by his quest for Nibbāna. Balance. This is a Majjhima Pada. This is the middle path, because you can get restless. Remember, agitation is the enemy of the mind, of the heart. There cannot be release, there cannot be liberation, freedom, when there is restlessness in the heart, agitation. So you have to pull back from that intense drive, the desire, the chanda, even Dhamma chanda, the desire for Dhamma has to be eventually let go of, because you're on the right path anyhow. You're locked on, remember. That's why the reason the Buddha said, stream enterer, stream winner, sotapatti. The person is sotapanna. He is in, she is in the stream. Don't worry, it's called the stream for a reason. It will take you straight to Nibbāna. So all you need to do is maintain the course so that the bumps against the banks of the river won't be so heavy. And maintain perseverance. Because across the way, you're going to come across a lot of adhammic qualities. Conceit is there, remember. The 5 fetters, upper fetters, have to be dropped. Restlessness is part of it. Conceit is another. Ignorance is the big one. Desire for becoming in the fine material realms and the formless realms as well. What is that? Those are challenges. Those are shackles. Those are things that we have to relinquish. But at the same time, the other extreme would be too intoxicated in your quest. If you struggle, you're going to hurt yourself. No, you will not fall from that cliff, from that mountain, and from that trail. You will not. But when you have a chance to attain from Sotapanna all the way to Arahantship in the same lifetime, when the possibility is there, and believe me, if you have attained the first stage in that same lifetime, you have every possibility to attain Arahanthood. The Dhamma's presence is a guarantee of that. The teaching of Lord Buddha that he gave in the Arya Savakas is a testimony of that. All you need is your participation to make that come true, instead of taking the lazy path and be like that hare or that rabbit who finds a nice root of a tree and settles down and says, hey, the tortoise is over there. Can't possibly catch up to me. If you have that attitude, you don't know when you will die. It might be next week, it might be next year, 10 years from now. First attain Arahantship and then go rest under the tree. say, I'm done. So there is that balance that Lord Buddha is talking about. And why is this the case? It is because the noble disciple in higher training guards himself well, for he knows that he still has more work to do in order to fully understand and directly experience it. This I declare. This concludes the second part. Of course, in the sutta there aren't these separations of part one, part two, just to facilitate and make things a little bit more palatable. That's why we wanted to, because it's a long sutta. Are there any questions? Thoughts? Remember the things that the Sekha has to always be training himself or herself in is using the special toolbox that the Buddha gave, the Dhamma has, if we know where to look for it. And it's in the Dhamma. It's not in the blind religious, ritualistic approach to Buddhism, as unfortunately what it has turned into. But to understand, to look at the fact that there's a rising of a sensation, we call samudaya. Then there is, so if there's a rise, there's a vanishing, right? There's an appearance, there's a disappearance. Experience. Let's pick an experience of that gives you pleasure. That's pleasant. You welcome it. This Dhamma shows us, unlike any teaching out there, nothing can come close to it. It gives us the tool to break it down by having us observe, oh, there's that sensation. And who's doing this? You are. You are the person. Look at how much audacity is giving you. It's freedom that is giving you the authenticity to be you, responsibility, the ownership of you. No one can have that. No one advocates that, apparently. But we're not interested in anything else. Freedom is going to be your freedom, no one else's. That's why each individual is responsible for their own happiness, freedom. So you see the sensation of joy happen, whatever it is, pleasant touch, a nice sound, a lovely image, whatever it is. So the observant eye, when sati is there, mindfulness is there, you're fully aware, you see it rising. You didn't get sucked into the details. Now, because you didn't get pulled into its features and specialties and this and that, whatever, you just saw, okay, there it is. I see you. I know I am looking forward to it. I know I am tasting it and it's sweet. Let's say it's something tasty. But you're not allowing yourself to be locked in that only the pleasurable part, because you're also looking at what will happen next. This is attagama. This is when that's samudaya, this is attagama. You're actually looking, seeing that it falls. Remember the breath? You can't keep holding the breath and still be called alive, right? You die. It's the same principle. This is the nature of things. Whatever rises, it falls. This is another way of understanding paticca-samuppada, law of dependent arising. So you're seeing it without getting into fancy analyticals and things. You're just looking at that pleasurable experience, tasty feeling, instead of fighting to recreate it, which most people do. You saw it, okay, and then it disappeared. I saw that too, okay. The problem is that we seek, like most people, gratification. We want to re-experience that. That is called asada. Think of it as getting grilled, like a piece of meat, like an ear of corn, or something else. You put a tomato on a. I remember my dad used to do, when he used to do barbecues when he was alive, so he would have these vegetables, and sometimes he would put the tomatoes, the onions, and the bell peppers or peppers. Every so often I'm looking away and there's a pop, and I turn around and I see the tomato is blown up, or the bell pepper on the grill, or it's burned on one side. That's what happens when you're seeking gratification. In the repeat of the tasty flavor that you tasted, because you did not want to see the attagama, you did not want to see the descent of that moment, you did not want to see the disappearance of that pleasurable experience. So what do? We seek gratification. We want to repeat, even though we're skipping the video, we're skipping the acknowledgement of there being a disappearance of that. Rise and fall. This is a typical state of an addict. The addict who loses interest in life is seeking for those up, high pitched moments, high spikes. He doesn't care for the bottom. But a person who's practicing the noble Dhamma is looking at it by pulling aside and seeing, what is this process? Oh, there's a spike and there's a drop. Oh, so by me wanting to repeat this, I am seeking gratification. I am seeking more and more satisfaction, even though I know I am going to be 100% of the time disillusioned by it. I'm going to be proven again and again wrong, that it can be something stable and fixed and not move. It stays in the pleasurable state. That itself, the constant falling back, is the terror that the Sekha could see, the noble disciple could see, the practitioner can see. And they get disgusted by that. And they want to get out of that. They realize this is torture. I'm the hamster in the hamster wheel. When is this thing going to stop? And the person realizes that it won't stop unless they put a stop to it. That's when they do the fifth one, which is nissarana. Nissarana is pulling away, putting a stop to it, getting out of the hamster wheel. So you had asada, then you have adinava, and then you have nissarana. This is quite empowering. In fact, this is what I see the only empowering definition that should be legitimately used. Real empowerment, because it is all about setting yourself free from suffering while you're alive, and you do not want to wait for death to come for you to be reborn somewhere, playing all that guesswork, gambling. There's no such thing in this Dhamma and Vinaya that the Buddha taught. And that's why many of the Arahants became Arahants young, and they had a whole lifetime in front of them as Arahants. So there is that old, almost unfortunately ingrained belief that arahantship or freedom is something to happen to us after death. Please eliminate that wrong view. Because so long as we have that, we will never attain the state of asekha, which is breaking beyond and going beyond and attaining arahantship. Because there's no guarantees what's over there. This is it. This is real. I can understand these 5 phases. But most people are stuck in the 4. They see the rise They like to keep that. And then even though there's the fall, they just want to ignore that. They're aware of it. And then they go chasing after that quest to gratify themselves with more of that pleasurable. Even though they're being grilled, even though they see the danger, but they don't care. They don't care. That's why we become like those addicts, dropping in our personality, then becoming something subhuman. But this path gives you also the fifth phase where you have a choice to step out. That's another way of understanding Nissarana. Stepping out of the hamster wheel into true refuge, to which you don't owe it to anyone, for which you don't owe it to anyone, except for your own perseverance, dedication to the practice. That is this Dhamma. That is beautiful in its beginning, beautiful in its middle, and beautiful in its end, as taught by Lord Buddha himself, which we're sharing. So if there are no questions, I wanted to salute you for showing up, as I was mentioning in the beginning of your sit today, for this lovely sutta, because it's deep, it's life-saving, if there's ever been any teaching to be called that, to be deserving of such a title. So please take good care of your lives and how you live it. Take ownership of your life. The best method that I have discovered in my life is the Dhamma. Nothing can come close to it. Nothing. Nothing. Because it's immediate, it's effective. It does what it says it'll do. Science even fails in many aspects of its empiricism. The Dhamma doesn't. Wow. Tell that to scientists. So let us, if there are no comments, questions, let me look again. Okay, let us transfer some merit. Akasatha chabumata devanagamahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasana. Akasatha chabumata devanagamahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desana. Akasatha chabumata devanagamahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mam paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well. May you and your loved ones be well supported, protected, prosperous, healthy. May you get along with the people around you, your loved ones. May there be harmony and understanding. And may this world be a safer place. May there be appreciation and love for each other, harmony and equanimity in people's hearts and minds. May people turn towards the Dhamma as they realize the beauty and rarity of living a human life. And may our merits be shared, especially with the Petas who are suffering, and all those living beings, all those humans, in fact, who are unfortunately, while on this planet as humans, are suffering like Petas. May the blessings of the Triple Gem be with them, with you, and all your loved ones. And may your practice continue prospering and growing. Until next time. Sukhi Hotu.